Hi everyone, welcome to our latest edition of the podcast. Marsha and I are just going to talk a little bit about the business side of things today. We talk a lot about technical side, but she and I have come to sort of business leadership from different directions. So trying to give maybe some insight and some tips and tricks to get a business started or keep a business running. So sort of a free format discussion. So we'll kick off and see where we go. So, good morning,
Yep.
Marsha.
Yeah. Good morning, David. Hi, everybody. Yeah, and I guess maybe a good place for us to start is just to, we've talked about this a little bit before, but maybe the Cliff Notes version of, how we got into our role. So David, you're president of UCDS. Do you want to give a little bit of insight into how you ended up in that position?
Yeah, so I started with UCDS for the first time back in 2007 when I met Mr. Nimmo, the owner of the company. He employed me as a consultant. I've had a couple of stints with UCDS, joining other companies like Emerson in the meantime. Um, but essentially, Ian's stepping back a little bit, so he asked me to run the company. He still owns the company, so some of that burden is taken off of me, which is great. And I know Marsha has to suffer with that side of it too. Um, but fortunately, it was an established company, so it's a very different, I guess, approach to having to start up and get everything off the ground and set up all the different systems and so on that surprisingly you have to do even with small companies. So that's how I got here. So, and Marsha, yourself?
Yeah, so I spent my career working in industrial automation. So I worked for Emerson in a bunch of different roles. Started as an engineer, went down and worked as a business development leader in Austin. Got to know a lot about like the business side and meet a lot of really, really great people, both like the technology folks, the like lawyers, leaders, all kinds of people, just kind of understand more about what does it take to run that company, which is very different than when it takes a small company, but good insights. Bounced around in a couple of different roles, and then in 2023 decided to take a step back and figure out what I wanted from my career because I'd spent the entire time in that business and had learned so much, but just felt like it was time for a little bit of a shift and started initially plant-wise industrial consulting. So that was starting a small services business. Yeah, there was a lot more stuff than I feel like sometimes people realize to get that going, thinking about things like insurance and this, not just there's business insurance, there's engineering insurance because we do perform engineering work. The question of like, do you want your company to have engineering licensure and what that looks like? And for me, the answer was yes. So I have a professional engineer on staff and kind of working through all of those details. Um, I'm sure we'll get into this, but like realizing the sales cycle of some of the activities and, when you're working with these really large manufacturing firms, and knowing that like it takes time to win some of these things unless they have an ongoing project, depending on what kind of consulting you do, like knowing and planning for lead time. And then because of that lead time, I ended up starting and kind of transitioning the company into a tech startup, which is a whole other flavor of business. So this has been primarily, like I bootstrapped the business for a long time and have been building and yeah, it's been quite a journey. It's been a little over a year and a half. Plantwise technically started in like September, August of 23, and then uh Atheon has really been taking off since like August of last year, so it hasn't even been a year yet.
And you said just before we came on air that you actually enjoy being a CEO, which is very different, right, from your previous role. So that was
It
interesting
is.
that you're actually enjoying all the hard work. I mean, it's not easy getting out there doing the legwork, and I know you've done a fair bit of traveling too. So I mean, it's very different.
It is. And, I think because I've gotten to very briefly wear both hats, right? Like being president of a consulting company and what does that look like, kind of coordinating mainly like I would like my experience was on like the operations side, right? Really planning for sales and kind of making sure that it just kind of runs, and then you get to do engineering work. The CEO of like being a tech startup, yeah, it's a lot of hats because you have to think about like there's so much networking involved, and like to be a tech startup and move very quickly like involves a lot of networking and a lot of detail, um and we're structured differently. And so but yeah, the more that I do it, the more that I love it. One of the things that I enjoyed about my career at Emerson was that I bounced around and got to see lots of different stuff. And that's my life all the time now. So if you like knowing what you're doing every day, CEO life is maybe not for you. But if you like that kind of like hyper dynamic, like who am I talking to? What am I doing? I'm talking to somebody in finance, I'm talking to somebody in engineering, I'm talking to somebody in technology, and wearing all these different hats, then, it might be a better fit. So
You mentioned networking, and I guess you have sort of two networks, right? I mean, you've got the technical side network, and then you've got the business network. And I guess there's very little crossover between those two, too. I mean,
that's true. Yeah. So today I'm wearing my Techstars shirt. So Appian went through it's called like a tech accelerator. So in the startup space, these are very common. In the industrial automation space, I didn't even know what this was until we started kind of poking around. Um, I think the reason that PlantWise has had some success is because I did have a network that I could lean on and talk to, and identify like what are opportunities, what kind of business is going on. I wasn't necessarily like cold calling very many people because I was leaning on people I already knew. Um, in the business world, when we decided like, yes, we want to go after the software space, I thought about PlantWise and was like, oh, that was like really critical to getting off the ground. And so Techstars has a really strong network. So that was really our like, kind of wedging our way into the startup space was working with them. So we went through like a program with them. I guess, David, from your perspective with UCDS, do you do a lot of cold calling? What does it look like to build out that business from your perspective?
yeah, it's just changed over the years. I mean, it used to be you could say, okay, I'm going to go to Houston, and quite often you'd get in and see, somebody, so maybe the plant manager or the automation engineer or whoever. That doesn't happen anymore. You just can't turn up. They won't let you in. So cold calling looks a little different, right? You're having to well, you can't cold call. You have to know somebody. You have to set up an appointment. You have to reach out, and it's a much more um, maybe intimate process than it was before. But it does limit you on, you can only work through the contacts that you have. Um, and then, the big conferences and so on that used to happen, where it used to be a great opportunity to meet, vendors and people that are interested in, the technology there. Those sort of things are very targeted now. So again, you don't often get opportunity to meet a wider range, and you've probably experienced that at the exchange that you went to recently. It's a captive audience almost, right? So it's very different in that respect today. And
I would agree. Like I don't think this is true in every industry, but it certainly is. Oh, I keep shaking my camera. It certainly is true in ours, which is that like a lot of the vendor oriented conferences get a lot of traction. And so it's this like it's like carving that out. Like if you are a small business, how do I fit into this ecosystem? How do I leverage my relationships? And if you go to those conferences, how do I make the most of that time? They're not, unless you're presenting, they can be quite expensive, even just the hotel costs and stuff, like being considerate of that budget. And uh, uh this is true both from our startup experience and our uh engineering experience. Is like it's almost like you have to do some homework and reach out in advance, because otherwise you might not get time with the people that you're trying to connect with, right? Because there's thousands of people potentially at these conferences. And yeah, it's harder to, there aren't as many just like open networking things, or they are more targeted. There's a lot of private dinners different things that happen depending on which one you're at. And so a lot of like where we saw success versus where we had maybe challenges were the places where we got into and kind of had those conversations and got into more targeted events that we fit into. And again, that's leaning on your network, which is bananas for like, I feel like a lot of people go into engineering thinking like, I'm not that social, like I can just sit behind a desk and do the hard math and science and stuff. My career has been hyper accelerated, I think, because I do the people person thing. Whether it's, even though I'm introverted, I save that energy and then spend it strategically, and then I go back to my hotel and I fall asleep.
That's true too. If you go to a big conference, and then you and I are lucky enough, we're going to be speaking at AFPM in the coming
Yeah.
months. Um, and I was there last year, and I guess the best way to meet people is in the Starbucks line.
Yeah.
You stand in there in the queue, and somebody else is wearing a badge, and you just strike up a conversation, or you head into the conference hotel or venue. You're walking down the
Mhm.
street, and somebody's walking beside you that has a badge, and you just start talking. That's not easy for everybody to do. Most
Yeah.
people in the Starbucks line are on their cell phones, not really want to talk to anybody, right? But
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. The best conversations that I had at the last conference I went to were at breakfast
Mhm.
and lunch, like just sat at a table where maybe I found one friend, but not the table full of my friends. Like I had to go find someone that I could break the ice with. Um, and that's led to some really successful, and I think just being open to like whatever that looks like, right? As
Mhm.
a business owner, it's hard not to think like I'm trying to get a deal, right? Or like I need to drive my business. But I've found that like thinking about it more as just like I just want to meet, like I just have a goal of meeting different people. Maybe you want to meet people within an organization to expand your network in a strategic way, right? Whatever. But you just kind of never know who's going to lead you to the thing that's actually going to work. Um, and I think that's very frustrating for people that are highly data oriented, right? It's like, oh, if I talk to the digital transformation person at this company, then I'll be able to break into that business. Not necessarily. Sometimes it's the engineer who just has a lot of, the engineer who you know, like their title doesn't reflect that they're the person who's going to want to work with you and really drive things. Like talking to a C-suite person is not always the right goal. Talking to, a director is not always the right thing. It and kind of recognizing that those loose ties often lead to some of the most successful conversations
I think
and
branding
ways that
can
you
help.
can help people or they can help you. So,
And I think branding helps there too. I mean, in days gone by, people would carry wads of business cards, and every time you met somebody, you'd exchange a card, right? You'd go home with
mhm.
maybe 100 new cards, and you'd be able to give away free things, even if it was like a pen or something like that.
Yeah.
Now I think even just, from your perspective, carrying a mug with your logo on gets people talking. You might not necessarily give them to people, but it's that
Yeah,
brand recognition again. That, oh, I've heard of you. And so
it
you're
is.
sort of having to find other ways to connect to people and have them almost approach you rather than you having to do all the outreach.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, balancing that with, like, the small business side, right? It's like, well, I might not have money to be able to go and buy because you buy, like, pens in the thousands. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know that I wanna buy 1,000 pens today, right? And so something that the Atheon team and the PlantWise team has done is, like, we made our swag.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Um
yeah.
and so the last one that we did, usually I'm wearing an Atheon shirt today. I've got the Techstar shirt, but the that's basically all I wear is I'm like plant who am I today? Am I PlantWise? Am I Atheon? Like I want somebody to look at my shirt and ask a question. Um it's very tech bro, but it works. Like it's silly, but like people see it and they're like, "Oh, you're that person." I was side tangent. We went to New York Tech Week and did a demo day pitch. So we pitched to a bunch of people and talked about what we were doing with the company. Very cool. Um, very, very tech. I don't know. New York Tech Week is a whole experience. That might be a whole other conversation. But we pitched on Monday, and then on Tuesday I went to a breakfast, and I had two different Atheon shirts. So the second day I was still wearing the Atheon shirt. I pitched in a hard hat because, of course, like I'm pitching with other tech startups,
Mhm.
and so I was like, how do I make myself memorable? So I pitched in my hard hat, and then I was in the elevator going up to this breakfast, and somebody just turns and looks at me and goes like, "Did you pitch in a hard hat yesterday?" And I was like, "Yep." So like, I mean, it does. It just sometimes that branding, that recognition makes a difference. And like New York Tech Week is like thousands of people, like thousands and thousands of people. So for somebody to like make that connection um was cool, if nothing else. We've also done and I thought this was really cool. I have it downstairs. I don't have it here, but using like crickets, we would print out like a sticker of our logo, and then there's like a cream you can use to etch glass. And so we
Mhm.
made custom water bottles that say Appian along the side. So there's all kinds of ways to get creative and kind of have fun when you're scrappy and need to get your branding out into the world. The shirts that we have that say Appian, Michael made with a cricket too. So like, yeah, it's just finding those opportunities to make the most of things and not overinvest, right? Be mindful of the fact that you're a small budget, a small business, and might not get an order the week that you need it. So,
My wife's a crafter, and she loves her cricket machine and vinyl.
yeah.
Mounds of vinyl to create things. So um, it's always cool to see what she does in shirts or whatever. And I think, as you
Yeah,
say,
we
trying to be memorable. I remember, years
mhm,
and years ago, if you recall MTL barriers, intrinsically
mhm.
safe barriers, the guy who would come around and sell them would explode things. You'd put them in a container and you would show the flame introducing and then introducing the sparks with the barrier or whatever you're trying to do and set things on fire and blow things up. Well, everybody knew him because, oh, you're the guy that blows things up. But I mean, you just have a reputation. Oh, you're the hard hat
Yeah,
lady.
yeah,
The
yeah. I
ability.
mean, I'll take it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, like that makes a difference. And yeah, it's just, it has been amazing to me how much it is just people oriented. Cause we, so uh, my CTO is my brother, and he and I went to camp on Monday to talk to students because, like, here in Missouri, like, there's not a lot of tech startups. So we were like, they might be interested. We got probably like 30 or more kids in the room, which was cool. Lots of questions, and then one of them asked, because we kept talking about the network, and they were like, "What other stuff did you get from like your experience going through this tech accelerator?" And I tried to mention some other things, but I was like, I got mentorship from the network. I got, like I got, uh, I just like kept trying. I was like, there's certainly some educational components, but I was like, I can't. Everything that we got was because we got to talk to somebody, and that was the thing. Um, and yeah, I think it's just being open to it. And if you are an introvert, like me, I guess, David, are you an introvert too? Yeah. Yeah. For me, I have to be strategic. So I choose to, like, if I'm going to an event or even like going into the office. So when I worked for larger companies or if I was going to visit a customer site or whatever, I'm very strategic about like, when am I on and when am I recharging? Because I may not get to like go by myself and, play my favorite phone game or whatever to like recharge. And so I had to decide like, am I doing the breakfast and lunch or am I going out tonight? Like, what's the best, what am I most interested in? And if there is somebody I'm trying to meet, when is that going to be the best fit? Because when I overdo it, I don't show up as well. It's not really high value for me. And like, they're people. They want to talk to somebody who's excited to be there. And if you're running low, right? If you're at 10% social battery, like it's just kind of less fun for everybody. You shouldn't stress yourself out and, just go take a nap if you need a nap and
It's like getting on a
come back
plane.
tomorrow.
When you get
Uh,
on a plane, you sit down and there's somebody next to you, and you're trying to work out, do they want to talk? Or do I put my headphones on? Or do I lay back and close my eyes and pretend I'm asleep? Or am I like recharged and I'm going to talk to them today? So
Yeah.
these choices you have to make as you get. Obviously, that's a microcosm of it, but the same as going into a big room of people. It's like, do I want to be the wallflower and listen, or do I want to be at the front and ask questions? And there's some
Hmm.
dynamics in how you work that out, and it changes. But
Yeah. And sometimes like I've had to pivot on a dime. Like we did, when we did this big demo day in New York, we had to do we had to do two rehearsal pitches and then we had to do the actual pitch. And then there was a reception and then there was an after party.
wow,
So every moment in between, I was just like I was just like, just take care of yourself. Like I was around a bunch of my cohort of companies. I was excited to see them, wanted to hang out with them. I was like, you just have to focus. Like, if you want to do any of the stuff later, you have to recharge right now. You actually cannot participate and still show up later. So, being kind to yourself and recognizing where your strengths are and where your limitations are is, I think, an important part of being in this kind of leadership position because it's not helpful to your team if you can't show up for them. Uh, you know, so
so let me ask you. I guess as you're going through this from an education perspective, so somebody coming out of college, they say, okay, I want to be CEO of a company, I want to do a startup. You've got your engineering degree. Do you think it's beneficial? Do people ask you? Do you have your MBA, or do you have other things? Is that something you think that would have been useful? Or
interesting. It's an interesting question. I'm going to say like a very non answer, which is that it's not limiting me, but um, it's so we're an early stage startup, right? I think I'll say for the consulting side, I don't know that anybody gets two toots, right? They care about like, can you come in and do the engineering work, right? So if it's president of a very small consulting firm that grows over time, I don't think anybody's ever going to notice, right? They might ask or be curious, but like I don't know that that's going to be a no for any particular reason because it's like as long as you show up and do the technical work and manage a business reasonably, there's lots of resources. So like when I was starting PlantWise, I was looking at like the Small Business Association has some resources to kind of help make sure like are you thinking about your financial planning? Are you doing all of the legal things you need to do, and kind of setting all of that up? There's lots of stuff in the world, especially like, and more of it is coming out with AI, like things to help you make sure, like, did I at least build a business correctly? So I would say it matters less on that side. On the startup side, so there's a few things like some companies, and as through Techstars, we got introduced to a lot of like investors and different folks. And if a company is looking to fundraise through like venture capital firms, there's a few things that matter. Um, Very early stage, and this is all just like you can go look it up. But early stage, uh, which pre-seed would be like pre-revenue or very small amounts of revenue. Seed being like 500,000 to like a couple million in revenue, and then I don't know. We didn't really learn about anything beyond that because we're all at this very early stage. But in those early, like pre-seed and seed eras, a lot of what investors invest in, and a lot of what like customers again don't really care. They're like, "Is your product cool?" Right? And that's really like why it doesn't matter on the consulting side either, is because you're not asking for a business person to invest in you. You're just talking to other technical people. If you raise by earning revenue, again, like nobody's really going to care. There will be a point where your company probably gets big enough where it's like, okay, this is getting a little bit more complicated. The deals are getting more complex. Um, the but as far as like early CEOing for like a pre-seed or a seed company, they care. Like investors want somebody who has business experience, or they want to know that your network has business experience in it, and you can lean on them and you can ask them questions. They want to make sure you're building a reasonable business, but they care more about founder market fit. So meaning that like I come from industrial automation. If I was trying to start an AI company that worked on your financial books, they'd be like, do you know anything about that?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I do not. But we're starting an engineering design kind of platform. And so they're like, when they watch me do the demo, they're like, oh, you know a lot about this. They're like, clearly you spent your career in this space, and that matters more than the business stuff early on. I think as we go on, and kind of grow the company, because um, we have a lot of big vision for where we want to go. If we truly like grow to the point of like a public offering, like doing an IPO or something like that, or getting acquired, then the question of like, is Marsha still the right person to be a CEO, or does she need more training in order to continue to fill that role? I think that'll start coming up more as we get bigger. But to start a company, if you're, uh, people who are interested in maybe doing a startup or getting involved in the consulting side, I wouldn't let that get in your way. There's lots of information in the world that can help you not mess it up. So,
So passion and a good network and
yeah.
good drive. I guess, as you say, the information's out there, right? So you're
Yeah.
using leveraging that rather than. And again, I've never been through an MBA, so I'm not sure what they teach you. But in terms of like, well, setting up an HR system or writing
Yeah.
contracts and things like, I'm sure there's elements of that, but a lot of that comes from practice, especially the
Yeah.
contract side of things. And
Yeah.
interesting,
And
ISA has a mini MBA. I don't know if you've looked at that. It's focused on
yeah,
the
I've
education
thought
industry.
about it. The timing hasn't worked out yet. It was like during Techstars, and I was like, nope, I can't do both. But I
Right.
was curious about that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I'm looking at maybe for the future, but again, it's low priority. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
like
just
there's
setting
always
up.
more stuff you want to do, right? So,
So I guess you started up a business. You've registered. You've got an LLC or S corp or whatever you have,
mhm.
and then they're starting building the systems, right? So I mean, HR, payroll, like say insurance, and all those things. I guess that's just. Um, are there any lessons learned that you did with that? For us, I was lucky everything's in place before I joined, but
Yeah.
I sort of managed those. But
Yeah, and so so I would say that my engineering shows in how I built my business, because I was like, let's get all the systems in place. Some of
mhm,
that was because I had this long sales time, so I was like, okay, let's do a bunch of research and let's do all the processes and get those established so that when I get orders, like it, and I had enough runway and kind of funding on the front. I backed my own company with my own funding, so that gave me some room to be able to like get systems in place so that when orders started coming in, I didn't have to think about both of those things at the same time. So we benefited a lot from that, is like doing the homework beforehand, which you could do that before you even like step out and start the business, right? You could be like, what are the programs I'm going to instantiate, whatever. Um, Depending on what your personal, and I think something that people don't think about when it comes to like setting up these systems is like, it turns out that you're a human and you have needs and you're a person and you have a family of some sort, right? Whether that's just your cat, or whether that is, maybe you have kids or want to be able to support, your lifestyle. I think that's one of the things that I've realized is it's really important to think about like what you need to be kind of conservative, because you might not always get an order as a small business, but also acknowledging that like I need to eat more than just ramen. I probably want to have some form of health insurance, whether that's through the marketplace or through, um, we ended up establishing a professional with a professional employer organization. So they, uh, which I wouldn't recommend it to everybody. Like you kind of need enough cash flow for it to make sense. But we get all of our health insurance and HR and all kinds of stuff through that organization. And by contracting it out, that made a lot of sense. So that can also be a huge win, is to identify like what are the things you're good at and the things you're excited about. And what are the things that like you could use help with, and budgeting to bring in other people to support you. Because at least for me, I was not suited to do every single activity within the business. I could tell, like, I'm familiar with the finances. I hate looking at them in a lot of detail. Like I don't want to shore up and say like, is what
Hmm.
category does this go in? Whatever. We have a bookkeeper. Like that is not for Marsha. Um, at the very beginning, you kind of have to, make it work, but identifying like, at least for me, what was a good fit and what wasn't, and then acknowledging that it's not a failure to not do all of the things and just focus on the stuff that you like. I mean, that's the fun of getting to run your own business is getting to do the fun stuff. So, what are the things that you enjoy getting to do the most, David?
I still really enjoy the consulting side of things, and
Yeah.
I enjoy the privilege of running the company and representing the company and so on. But um,
Hmm.
there's two aspects of it. I really don't. I enjoy both sides of it. Certainly, there's somewhat there's a level of freedom you get, obviously,
Hmm.
from running your own company.
Yeah.
Um, but on the other side, it is it's not easy, not for everybody to do. I mean, sometimes there's hard decisions. Um, sometimes the best will in the world, you go through high levels of workload and very low levels of workload, and not just for you, but for your team, and
Yes.
trying to keep people motivated at the lower end. When things are not there, or even when you're busy and you need to get more work for the next quarter, those sorts of things that are,
Yes.
um, they're not necessarily the easiest of things to do, and but I enjoy all aspects of it. So I can't really say there's one particular thing that I enjoy. One thing we don't have to do is because we're a small consultancy, we don't have to go out and look for funding, or we don't have to look for somebody to buy us, or things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a lifestyle business, as they would
mhm.
say, right? Like the point of the business is to continue existing and to continue to let people who are excited about what they do get to do that thing, right?
Yeah, and obviously you wear many hats. I mean, the marketing and sales
Yes.
side of things, that's huge for a small company. Not every one of you has to do that. It's not just, well, is our sales guy take care of it? Well, everybody has to be contributing in blogs
Yeah.
and papers, and then just meeting with clients and making networking and so on. So maybe as you get bigger and have 100 people and you can dedicate a sales team, back away from that. But small companies can't afford to do that.
Yeah.
But even in that, is you get to present to a lot of people, you get to go and see a lot of new people, and that's fun. So
Yeah. Well, and even like, it's interesting in like the social media aspect because I will say like one of the things that I think has been an interesting learning, I would say, from my perspective is like we've been running the social media platform pretty extensively for, about a year and a half. And we try to post almost every week, if not more than once a week, or reshare different posts that we agree with and kind of keep current. And it's like, okay, well, how much does this really matter? Because sometimes we don't get any likes. Sometimes, sometimes you're not getting that engagement that you expect. When I was at Exchange 2 week or I don't know, a month ago or whatever, people like knew what I was doing. And
mhm.
I'm like, oh, there's just like the internet's just full of lurkers, which again, I think it just comes back to like when you're working in a business, being able to kind of step away from that data oriented engineering self and know that some of the things that you're doing, you don't get to have quite the quantitative, you know, feedback that
Mhm.
we get to enjoy on a regular basis when we're working on engineering projects, right? You have to kind of understand that sometimes the work uh is towards like a bigger goal. And so like, you put a post out into the world and nobody reacts to it. That that still is people are still seeing it, they might be reading it, they might enjoy it, they might agree with it. And they're just not saying it because they're engineers who might be introverted and just don't engage in that way. So that's been an interesting learning for us too, because we weren't sure. And then we got to a point where we actually got that, customer feedback. And it's like, okay. All right. We're doing some of the right things and we'll keep kind of adjusting and learning what we can from the data we have. But just knowing that, you know, that's part of the gig.
Yeah, and there's a subset of people that really enjoy posting and being provocative on there.
Hmm.
Sort of putting out some new ideas that they don't
Yeah.
mind being shot down or getting in hard discussions. A lot of
Yeah.
engineers don't want to put themselves out there. They might have some ideas, but I'm not going to say that because everybody might disagree with me, and I'll get all these experts telling me that I'm wrong. So
Yeah.
they shy away from it. And, um, although it's a social platform, it's really not something that a lot of people feel comfortable in. I mean, LinkedIn is obviously the example that is probably prime for us, but
Yeah.
um, and then maybe that's sort of historic based on experience from more personal ones like Facebook. You got to be
Right.
really careful what you post there because the world and his dog has an opinion that's different from yours. So, so people run a little shy, I think, on posting there. But and the pure volume. I mean, I don't know how many
Yeah.
posts you
It,
see a day, but it's a lot. It's
yeah, it can be. And like, and it's annoying because there are tricks, right, to getting people to engage or getting your network to see it. And so until you learn those, it does feel a little daunting, even just to start. And then but I think the thing that worked well for us is it was just like, there are a few things. Like, I'm only going to speak about stuff that I actually believe or that I care really strongly about. That's the way that most of my team feels. And so it's really identifying, like, what are those, like, I would call them like knowledge nuggets, that it's just like, this is my experience, this is the thing, and being able to share those just authentically, like, because I would frame it, because I think a lot of engineers, myself included at times, like, are like, where there's a fear of being wrong that runs rampant among people. And if you're talking about an experience that you had or a learning that you had, you're not wrong. like, uh, and so, like, they're thinking about it from that perspective and having the right framing, both in like your brain and in what you're posting, can be very helpful. I will say that ChatGPT is also very good at helping you craft whatever idea. Like, if you got a little knowledge nugget and you're like, I don't know if this would make a good social media post, ask ask your favorite AI companion, because I bet that they will format it into something that you're like, I'd click on that. It's, I think in the engineering space overall, there's a lot of kind of like, how much, and is it a good fit for AI? And is it, what is it training on? And do I care about that? And do I want it to train on that information? But social media is, to me, a very low hanging fruit for AI. One, I'm going to put it into the world anyway, so training on my idea, it's going to train on it anyway. So letting it kind of do that heavy lifting, and I think even in just a kind of across my small business, that's been something we've been looking at, is like, what are the right areas for an AI intern or an AI companion to kind of like help ease the workload to some extent, while still keeping the ownership and the authenticity and the accuracy with the people. So, is UCDS leveraging AI in any kind of way at this point?
not really, not from a consulting perspective. I mean, obviously from the social media side, we do a little bit of
So,
that. But
yeah.
lots of posts on LinkedIn about AI and marketing, AI and sales. How do I
Yes.
target sales? And I guess that's a developing area, and some people are more active in doing that. But um, again, maybe we're a little bit more conservative in our approach at the moment.
Yeah. It's funny. So, like, when we were going through the tech accelerator, um, the every other company in our cohort, which, by the way, we just like had the best experience. Like, I'm sure that this happens from time to time, but I think we got very lucky. The mentors we got, the other companies in the cohort, just very, very lucky. But all other 7 of the companies were big AI companies. And like using AI in really strategic ways to build their product, to build their product in their product as part of their business. And we're sitting over here, engineers, thinking like, ooh, I don't know. And I'm still more on the cautious side, but I would call myself cautiously optimistic at this point. There are a few advances that have made a big difference. Some of the models have kind of just broached the point of, I'm like, okay, well, that could be useful. But if it involves customer data, like, if we're thinking about using it in the product, then we're like, okay, how can we make this a secure box? Because none of our customers want their data in the world. So that's something that's very core. Like we have to think about cybersecurity. We have to think about what the, where is the model reporting to? What does that look like? All very important questions that we're having to consider as a product. Um, and then like we're mainly using it in terms of like our process. So the way that we build sometimes involves AI strategically. But one fun one is recommend people you can look up Lovable or things similar to Lovable, but they in the product world it's kind of fun because you can there are products that will automatically generate all the code and actually create like a web app fully built based on a prompt. So there's some cool ways to prototype and test with customers. Like if you have an idea and you want to, you're curious and want to see like, is this something that would solve a problem? Is this a real business? You can do that, really fast. Being mindful of all of the security and data limitations, but being able to, kind of be more creative in the tech space, I think is a cool outcome of where AI might take us. And hopefully we'll figure out the energy consumption stuff real soon because I'm excited about the innovation and I'm also concerned for the earth. But
And how much ends up behind a firewall? I mean, you can see AI on a site.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
you've got all the information that you've gathered over the years. You've got your PHAs, you've got your LOPers, you've got your processing instructions, procedures, all that stuff. Generally pretty discombobulated. I mean, it's all over the shelves
yes,
in different systems. And you got to think, well, I have something presented to the operator and say, what should I do? So, but all that's going to be behind, I would suggest, behind some sort of firewall. That's not
yes,
out there in the world to aid everybody. So,
yeah,
and I think, as we go further forward, I mean, standards organizations, a prime example, do they really want to open up all their standards into the real world? Because people will take that, generate new content, new stuff. So I think people will gradually start removing stuff back from the public domain, which might be self-defeating for AI because then it's got nothing to learn on. So I think there's got to be a balance somewhere for that. I mean, but yeah, I mean, there's endless opportunities I think, to embed in technology as well as use for business processes.
yeah. And it just like, I think from kind of going back to our original thesis, like as a small business owner, it is an interesting opportunity to keep your staff lean until you can bring it out, right? You
Mm-hmm.
still have to do a lot of testing and checking and stuff like that, but streamlining some of those processes can help you keep a smaller team for longer when you might not have the budget to do
Mm-hmm.
some of those things. You can achieve, you can kind of take your scope and expand it out slightly so that you can feel like a bigger company than you actually are, which is like a cool side effect of the technology coming into the world. Uh, it's gonna be interesting. And then yeah, the other thing is like sometimes because this has been my experience, and it's like no guarantees, right? Like I also feel very lucky in some of the things that have happened. Some of it is uh luck is what you make it. So some of this is like I built a very strong network. So I have some opportunities that are coming from that. But the other thing is that some people feel just like you do, right? And want to start a business, right? If you're interested in running your own consulting firm or running your own tech firm, there are uh there are people in your network who would be interested in joining you. And sometimes that means like as a founder, not paying yourself quite as well. And then like when I was running Plantwise only, it was like I wouldn't pay myself super well enough to, not just eat ramen, as I pointed out earlier, but I would pay myself better. Oops. Um, I would pay myself better when I was billable. So like sharing in the downsides and sharing in the upsides. And so it's been interesting because I have found other people who are interested enough in being like having that control over their career and getting to work when they want to and choose the jobs that they work on to some extent, right? Sometimes you just need to make money. Um, but that like you might be surprised, right? Like AI isn't the right solution for everything. You might find that people are sometimes will surprise you in how they show up. So
And let's say the lifestyle is somewhat different, right? You get to pick and choose your schedule and,
yeah,
and your vacations and things like that.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I will say I had more flexibility when I was president of a consulting firm only and not running a tech business. I have control over my schedule, but I opt into working a lot. You have to love it because you work a lot. The consulting side, like, there's certainly still a lot to do, but it was more flexible. And I think that's part of like why team members especially are happy to join because it's like, yeah, I don't, I want to understand when you're around so that I'm not like texting you when you're not working because you should be able to not work. But yeah, they they certainly like the flexibility. So,
So I
but
guess the message is the American dream is still alive. If you want the effort in
yeah,
to learn, network, do all the hard stuff, you can achieve great things. I think
yeah, and you don't have to be an MBA to do it. Just we are a bad sample size because according to us, you might need to be a chemical engineer or an engineer. But no, I do think that there's a lot of cool things that you can do, and it certainly takes a lot of effort. We got very lucky with some of the things that have happened to us. Like getting it, I will say Techstars luck. Luck and a lot of work, but um there are a lot of programs like Techstars that can help you get started. And there are, if you're strategic, I think about how you start the consulting business. There's a lot of opportunity there too.
So just
Awesome.
wrapping up,
Mhm.
if you enjoyed the podcast and you have any questions for us, please put it in the comments on where we post it, and we'll be happy to get back to you. And Marsha has a wealth of recent knowledge I'm sure she'd be more than happy to to share and chat with you and continue to build her network that way. So
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm
no,
certainly
absolutely.
I'm certainly happy
It's
to
a
for it. So.
Yeah, no, and it just is. There's not a lot of people that run these businesses. Sometimes like the president, like David, is not always accessible. So he's always been very warm and welcoming to those conversations, especially as I was starting. So I reached out to David. So yeah, definitely reach out to us. Would love to hear from you. Awesome.
Thanks everybody, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Okay, thanks. Ed.